Welcome to the video for C4.2.2 Detecting Cations. So before we start this lesson, because we've jumped ahead to C4, there's a few things that we need to know before that's assumed that we know for this lesson. So first of all, an ion is an atom that's gained or lost electrons. So we know that electrons are negative. So if it's gained an electron, it's going to become negative. And if it's lost an electron or more than one electron, it's going to become positive. So either way, it's going to become a charged particle, and that's what an ion is. It's an atom that's become charged. And we have special names for ions, where depending on whether they're positive or negative. So an anion is a negative ion. We're not interested in those today. That'll be next lesson. A cation is a positive ion. And an example of a negative ion is hydroxide, which is OH minus. So we need to know that hydroxide is OH minus for this lesson. We also need to know that a precipitate is an insoluble solid that forms from a solution. Quite often that comes from the solution reacting in some way. So when we did the test for detecting carbon dioxide, a precipitate formed then. That was because the carbon dioxide was reacting with the lime water solution. So before we start today's lesson, there's some quiz questions for you to have a go at. These kind of summarise everything that you've done from year 9. If you're watching the interactive version, the quiz questions will come up now. Okay, so our learning objectives for today, we need to be able to describe how to carry out flame tests and also describe how to carry out hydroxide precipitate tests. So both of these are tests for cations. And you also need to be able to interpret the results of these tests to identify an unknown. So if we don't know what the metal is, what the metal cation is, then by doing these tests, we can find out. So the first test we need to know about is our precipitation with sodium hydroxide. So to do this test, it's really simple. You get a solution of your metal ion, and you put it in a boiling tube or a test tube, and you just add sodium hydroxide. And when you do that, there should be a precipitate. So you'll see a solid forming. And depending on that colour, it will tell you which metal we have. So if you get a white precipitate, you can narrow it down that it's either calcium or zinc. So unfortunately, we can't determine between the two from this test because they both give a white precipitate. If you have a blue precipitate, then that means you've got a copper solution. Now, iron, you've probably not met these before, this kind of Roman numerals in brackets, but that, so the first one is iron 2, so that 2 capital I's in a bracket means it's a Roman numeral for 2, and that means that it's an iron 2 plus iron, so it's Fe2 plus, and that will give you a green precipitate. Iron 3 plus we represent with that bracket and the 3 I's, and that, if we add sodium hydroxide to that, we get an orangey brown precipitate, which is kind of rusty colour. Right, so our second test is the flame test, which you've probably all done in year 7 or on your transition day when you came up. So what you do is you place a chemical in the blue flame at the Bunsen burner and you observe the colour. And this works because metal compounds emit a colour when they're placed in the flame. So we use the blue flame because then we can see the colour better, because if you've got the yellow flame, then you can just see the yellow colour and it kind of masks any other colour. So different metals are going to give different colours. Now, if you fancy having a go in an extension task, you can find out how electrons are linked to the colour being emitted. You might have to draw a diagram to help explain that. Right, so test 2 in more detail, so flame test in more detail. But this is quite often asked as an exam question to write the method for, so you need to learn this method. So the first thing you do is you put your goggles on. We're going to use a wire loop for this. So it's just a loop, it's just a piece of wire that's bent into a loop. And because this test is very sensitive, so it reacts to very small amounts of sample, we need to clean it first. So we clean it first by dipping the loop into acid. And then we need to make sure we get rid of all the acid. So we put it in the blue flame until the colour doesn't change anymore. We then put it back in some new acid, and this just moistens it, and it means the sample's going to stick to it more. You then dip the loop in either the metal salt solution, or it could be the solid sample. You then put the loop in the flame, and you note the colour that it goes. These are the ones that you need to know. So you need to know that lithium goes red, sodium goes yellow, potassium goes lilac, calcium goes orangey red, and copper goes greeny blue. The ion in the middle is just telling you the formula of the ion. We don't need to worry about that too much at the moment. So you can see lithium and sodium and potassium, they're in group 1, so they form a +1 ion. Calcium's in group 2, so it forms calcium 2+, and copper's a transition metal, which when we learn about those, you'll realise that they can have different charges, but in this case, we've got copper 2+. Right, so what you need to do now, we've learned all the new knowledge. So for task 1, I want you to look at those 4 pictures there, and I want you to list the names of each metal. So A equals B equals C equals D equals. Right, task 2 is a bit more complicated. I want you to copy that flowchart down and then fill in the blanks. So wherever there's a blank box, you need to write a sentence in there. Hopefully it'll make sense. It can be a bit tricky, this, so email me if you get stuck on it. Right, that's the lesson done. The last thing you need to do is answer the quiz questions. So if you're watching the interactive version of the video, the quiz questions will pop up now. Okay, thank you for listening. See you next time.